So, this is our July webinar for Inclusion Geeks, and this month's topic is building micro resilience at work and beyond. I'm really excited about this topic, and I hope you are too. So, for those of you who already know me, this is going to just be a quick refresher. And for anyone who's new to Inclusion Geeks or new to our webinars, my name's Felicia. I'm going to be your facilitator for today. I'm one of the co-founders of Inclusion Geeks, and our mission is to help make workplaces work for everyone. So we do lots of different programming, including workshops, trainings, webinars, coaching, you name it, we probably have some kind of a solution for you. I am actually based in Western Massachusetts. I am in a town called East Hampton, which is the traditional lands of the Nipmuc, Pocumtuck, and Nonotuck peoples. And I don't know about you all, but it is very hot here today, so I'm currently hiding out in some AC. But enough about me. We will get to know each other a little bit more, but excited to get this topic started. So here's a few different ways that we can engage with each other during our webinar for today. So it's going to be an hour long, and the chat is the best way for us to communicate back and forth. My colleague Rachel is also on this webinar, so if you need any assistance, especially any technical assistance, she'll be the first person to go to, but you're always welcome to send me a message either in the public chat or privately, and I'll do my best to keep on top of that. We will have a poll, a Slido or two for you to engage with, and then we'll have some Q&A at the end. So I think we should have about 10, 15 minutes at the end for some dedicated Q&A. So if you have questions along the way, feel free to put them in the chat or hang on to them till the very end, and we'll make sure we have some time to go through everything. Finally, if it's helpful for you, we do have closed captions enabled for today, so you can go ahead and turn those on or off using your own Zoom tools. And we also have different views. You can use speaker view for better access to see me as well, but you have all those tools on your end, so feel free to adjust as helps for you. All right, so I see some hellos are still coming through in chat, which is great. Keep that coming, but we're going to get into it. Now, I always like to just make a quick note of what our Heritage Month is before I get into the topic at hand. And so before we go into anything further, happy Disability Pride Month. It is also French American Heritage Month. So really briefly, we're still in July. We're just about halfway through, just over the halfway point at this point. And Disability Pride Month is celebrated every July since 1990. And the point of this month is to help honor the achievements of people with disabilities and advocate for their rights. This is something that's really personal for me because I am disabled. And so this is something that I love to highlight and share with people. And this is a great time to do it. Also, for anyone who's attending today who's based in Massachusetts, fun fact, the first Disability Pride Day was actually held right here in Boston in 1990. Now, this flag here that you see on the screen is the Disability Pride flag, and it's been changed a little bit. So I believe this is maybe a slightly older version, but it was originally designed by Anne McGill, and it's a symbol of solidarity, awareness, and acceptance for the disability community. So it features this diagonal band of different colors that kind of cut across a dark background, and the colors symbolize the barriers that disabled people face and also the creativity and resilience of the community. And each color represents a different type of disability. So I'm not going to go into all of that, but just in case anyone's interested. And as always, I like to start off with just mentioning whatever Heritage Month we are in because our name is Inclusion Geeks, and these are really quick and easy ways to practice inclusion immediately. So this webinar is not about disability pride, it is about micro resilience. So let's talk about it. I want to start off with talking about understanding what micro resilience even is. And for those of you who've been to some of our webinars in the past, this session might feel and look a little bit different. So it's meant to be gentle, it's meant to be practical. Those are things that we always love. We love to give you practical strategies, tools, and tips. Now, you're not going to leave here today with a really long to-do list, but I am going to offer you some insights and some tools that will hopefully help you feel more grounded and confident. And I don't know about you, but those are things that I can always use more of. Quick note, I am not a social worker. I'm not a psychologist. I like to joke that I practice what I call business therapy for my clients, but I'm not a psychologist. So this is going to be a little bit high level and broad, but my focus is really going to be on how can we take some of these concepts and apply them to the workplace in particular, because that's what we're all about. Now, again, I don't know about all of you, but for me, stress, the fear of burnout, feeling overwhelmed can be pretty commonplace. And so, what I want to talk about today is what are some realistic, doable steps that we can take to push back against that. So let's start off with talking about what is resilience, and then we'll get into micro resilience. And again, for anyone who knows me, I like to start broad and then narrow my way down. So let's start with defining resilience. Now, for those of you who are sitting here and you're watching and you're thinking, I have an idea of what resilience is, let me know in chat if you have an idea of how you would define this or a definition that's really close to mind. Pop that into the chat and let us know. And as folks are thinking, and if you have anything to share in chat, feel free to type that in. There's a lot of definitions out there, so I just want to name that. And researchers and experts tend to agree that resilience is complex. As a construct, it can have different meanings depending on the individual, the company, the culture that we're operating in, or even the society that we're living in. Also, resilience isn't static. So we could exhibit more resilience at one point in our lives versus another point in our lives. And we might be more resilient in one aspect of our lives versus another aspect of our lives. Now, I'm seeing some stuff come through in chat, so I'll name that before I share my definition. So, I'm seeing in chat, we see grit, overcoming adversity, the ability to bounce back from adversity, pushing through. Yeah, lots of stuff here, and we're all kind of on the same page so far. So, here's my definition to add into what you all are already sharing. So, here's my working definition. And I want to note that this is heavily influenced by social work practices. So, for anyone here who's experienced in that area, this probably feels pretty familiar to you. So, resilience is the capacity to adapt, rebound, or bounce back. Those are those words that we've already seen coming through from adversity, conflict, failure, or even increased responsibility. So, from a workplace context, it could be you've got more stuff on your plate. Now, resilience is enhanced through our connections with others, and it is influenced by our identities, diversity, and things like our ethnicity, our race, gender, age, economic status, religion, all sorts of identities, ability, for sure. In its most simplified form, the key to resilience is trying really hard, then stopping, recovering, and then trying again. And there's definitely a tie to positive psychology and positive emotions, although that tie is still being analyzed. And so some research are looking at resilience as a positive coping psychological resource, along with other resources and emotions like optimism and hope. And one way to build resilience is by talking to yourself with a positive mindset or spin. Now, for a lot of us, resilience is when you keep pushing through those problems, you're pushing yourself to do your best, you're powering through that adversity, and it tends to be talked about in very positive terms, like, oh, she's so resilient, and that's a good thing, right? But on the other hand, being too resilient could lead to burnout. It could lead to being totally exhausted or even perpetuating a harmful situation. So, for example, like we might actually, by pushing ourselves to keep going through a bad situation, tolerate that bad situation longer than we really should, or an abusive situation, even. Now, resilience, or what I sometimes like to call macro resilience in comparison with micro resilience, which we'll talk about in just a moment, is kind of needed in some ways for really big issues. So think about if you're going through a major life change, like you're going through a divorce, or you're rebuilding after a natural disaster, recovering from illness. That's when you need macro resilience. But on the flip side, now let's switch gears and talk about micro resilience. So, what is micro resilience? If anyone has a guess, again, feel free to pop that in the chat or make a note to yourself and think, what is micro resilience? Now, as always, I have a definition. I'll share that in just a moment, but curious what your thoughts are around the difference, especially between macro and micro. So, as you're thinking and as you're maybe even typing through, I'm going to share my definition with you all. So, micro resilience refers to the practice of making small, intentional, and science based adjustments throughout your day that will help you quickly recover from stress, maintain your focus, and sustain that energy and performance, even if you have ongoing challenges going on. Now, unlike traditional resilience strategies, which often focus on that really big picture recovery, like taking a vacation or taking a sabbatical, taking a long break, micro resilience is all about the quick and immediate. So it's in the moment techniques that are quick, easy, instantaneous, that will help you over the long term prevent burnout, prevent that overwhelm, and keep you operating at your best. So basically, the biggest difference here between macro and micro. So macro resilience is things like surviving a major life event. Micro resilience is going to be more about daily grounding practices. So I'll take another quick pause and see if there's any coming through in chat. So I see here capacity to recover from everyday stressors. Absolutely. So why does micro resilience matter? Well, when we're thinking about micro resilience, it's about recharging our batteries while we're living our daily life. So we're not taking a big break. We're not completely changing up our lives. We're not, doing something really different than our normal day-to-day routine. We're living our daily lives. We're doing the things that we do every day. Now, what we're really thinking about here, though, is we want to weave in some small recoveries into that daily routines instead of just pushing through and forcing yourself to just survive, and then needing serious downtime if you're just pushing, pushing, pushing to then recover because you burn out. Now, there's a lot of research in the field of sports psychology, interestingly enough, and I've found that it's a really helpful way to showcase why microresilience matters and how it can impact somebody. So, researchers studied tons of different top ranked tennis players in order to try and understand why there were hundreds of players that were on all of these different international tours, but only a very small handful of them would actually routinely win their matches. And the differentiating factor that they found was that while they didn't really find any consistent differences between the best players, what they did find was differences in what those players did in between scoring points. So the top athletes focused on energy recovery, positive focus when they were sitting courtside between the games and the sets. And so these players were able to bring their heart rates down to a more ideal zone more quickly and more efficiently in comparison with their less successful peers. The players who are at the bottom of the rankings would typically stay really tense, keyed up, distracted in that 16 to 20 seconds that usually take place between scoring a point and the next serve. And that's a pretty small time frame, 16 to 20 seconds, but that's the big difference that these researchers found between these two groups of players. So in everyday life, we're not all tennis players, but in everyday life, micro-resilience helps prevent the buildup of chronic stress. It supports sustained productivity, and it helps us bring our A game a little bit more consistently, even when life is pretty hectic. So let's talk about some practices. Micro resilience allows us to perform better, have more energy, have more focus, and be our best with little or hopefully no stress, but at least less stress and less or no burnout. And with micro resilience, the goal is to recover a little bit along the way that will allow us to keep going longer than we would otherwise. And there are some small like hacks or tips that we can do to build our micro resilience. So it's kind of just like working out the gym. There's little things that I'm going to talk to you about that will help you build your everyday practice. So let's review a few of these practices. And I see in the chat there's a comment that's come through that says, I think micro resilience matters when you have disabilities, which is a great tie into Disability Heritage Month. It means that you need to make daily choices, adjust your environment, take new habits, so you can conduct your activities without being drained at the end of the day. Absolutely. And this is a topic for another time, but I'll mention really quickly there is a very sort of classic concept that's brought up a lot that I think aligns really nicely with this comment that's called spoon theory. And I'll be happy to share more resources on that later if anyone's interested. But in conjunction with this, let's talk about some everyday practices that could be helpful for us. All right. So first, and this is going to maybe be tough for some people. I know it's really tough for me. Have a consistent bedtime. Now, I don't know about you, but for me, I'm a night owl and I like to stay up really late, which means that a lot of times I actually don't go to bed at the same time. And so this one's a tough one for me, but it's a really easy, quick practice that will help you build your own practice in this area. So first, go to bed at the same time, or at least be consistent around how you have your bedtime practices. Second, journaling. Now, I don't know about you all, but I am a big journal fan. So I have a journal. It's actually right next to me as we speak. I try to journal every single day. It started off as a practice a few years ago where it was literally a New Year's resolution that I put in place for myself. And what I find is that, especially in times when it's really stressful, there's a lot going on, it both helps me to kind of help clear my mind a little bit more, and it helps me remember where I've been and where I'm going. And it's a great reflection tool. So I'm a huge fan of journaling, and I'll be happy to talk to more people about the journaling lifestyle and ecosystem if people are interested. All right. In terms of workplace practices, take a break between your meetings. Now, again, everyone's got different workplaces and different styles, so this may or may not hold true for all of you, but especially for those of us who are maybe in more hybrid spaces or working remotely, working virtually, I can't say this is true for everybody, but for me, I know that I actually work longer and harder now that I work primarily remote first, as opposed to when I worked in the office. There was just a lot of natural breaks that were kind of automatically built in when I was in person with folks. So think about, how long it takes you to ride up the elevator, maybe if you're in a building that has elevators, or moving from room to room if you were going to different meetings. It takes time to actually walk around. Chatting with someone in a shared kitchen, right? So there's all these little breaks that get kind of built in automatically. But for me, working remotely, I sign into this computer and here I am. And so it actually has been a struggle for me to remember that I should be having some breaks between meetings. And it doesn't have to be a long break, it could even be just a 1 minute, 60-second pause to breathe deeply or reset your mind, just kind of refocus yourself a little bit. Next practice I want to mention is short stretches. Now, for anyone who's still playing Animal Crossing, this is not my avatar, although it looks similar, but I usually have my avatar has darker hair. But they've got some great little fun stretches in there, and we can do the same thing physically and in person. And so, again, because for me, I'll just say I sit in front of my desk for whatever it is, 6 to 8 to 10, whatever amount of time it is, hours a day, I don't always remember to get up and move my body and stretch it. And so that can also be really helpful to help us reset and just be more present and grounded in our own body. Drink water. We're probably all chronically underhydrated, so make sure that you're drinking enough water. And the 5 minute rule is really helpful too. So this is just a sort of like just 5 minutes rule. And what I think about this rule is that a lot of times we have different projects that we're working on. And sometimes the overwhelm comes because we know it's going to be a really hard project. Or maybe it's not hard, it's just annoying. And we don't want to work on this project. Or it's just going to be a little complicated and we're trying to push it off. So the just 5 minute rule is basically just give yourself 5 minutes to start working on whatever it is that you've been avoiding. And then you can even set a timer. Once that timer goes off, what I have found for me is that usually it's just that initial hurdle of getting into something. And then once I'm in it, I'm like, oh, okay, this isn't that bad. I can just get into it and I'll keep going. Or maybe the timer goes off and you're thinking to yourself, I'm good. 5 minutes was more than enough. But guess what? You still have 5 minutes more of progress on that project than you did before. So you can literally set yourself a timer to get into a project. Next is having a mindful transition. Now, what I mean by this is think about how are you transitioning between the end of one task and the beginning of the next. This can actually help improve your focus and reduce mental fatigue. And this is where things like the stretch or the 5 minute break or taking a break between meetings can kind of help with this idea of how are we transitioning? Because again, if we're just jumping from task to task to task to task during our day, that's going to eventually overwhelm our brains. And so thinking about, is it taking a breath? Is it remembering to go and use the restroom? Is it catching up on email? Is it closing your eyes and just sort of, pausing for a moment? It's going to look different for each of us, but what does that transition look like? Next is attention shifting. And this kind of, again, goes along with this idea of transitioning. So, attention shifting means that we're briefly focusing on something that's completely unrelated to the task at hand. And this practice can actually help us prevent mental fatigue and improve focus. So, it seems a little bit counterintuitive. And you don't want to go into the trap of having your attention shifting then lead into just completely losing sight of what you're working on. But having some breaks and some differences in what you're thinking about and what you're focusing on can help you actually increase your focus. Now, celebrate small wins. They don't all have to be big wins, but celebrate small wins to reinforce positive momentum. And so that can be you crossed off that task that was just hanging around for a really long time. It could be using that 5 minute rule. It could be whatever it is for you, but celebrate the small wins in addition to the big wins. And then finally, prioritization techniques. And it's starred here on the slide because I'm going to talk a little bit more about a specific technique in just a moment. So these are just a couple examples of micro resilience and how we could think about just importing them into our day to day, especially at work. And the other thing I want to mention is that we can also think about stacking some of these habits. So, what that means is, for example, take a stretch and then drink some water, or consistent bedtime plus journaling. I stacked that one as an example because that's a practice that I try very hard myself to say, okay, when I go to bed, that's when I'll journal. And so that forces me to think about what time am I going to bed so I can have enough time to journal, or that transition plus the attention shifting plus the small wins, right? So all of these stacking practices will also help us build consistency. All right, so I mentioned that I'm going to give you an example of another technique. And so this is something called a delegation matrix. And so a delegation matrix is all about identifying what can only you do. And I find that in my work, I always recommend this matrix to managers and leaders, especially. So some of us on the call may not be in that position. And this, I think, can be helpful for everyone, but especially for folks who are in more of a managerial role or a leadership role. This is a wonderful tool to use because what tends to happen is when you kind of start going up the ladder and you start having more responsibility, you have more work to do. But a lot of times, and especially for managers who've been individual contributors who are then promoted into managerial positions, part of the issue is that you know how to do the work, but now you're not always doing the work yourself. And so, what tends to come up for folks in this bucket is that you have a hard time letting go. And so you might look at something that a direct report is doing and say, oh, but I could do it better. And if anyone's ever felt that way, put a plus in the chat or just think to yourself. I know I've experienced that myself. And so we just can't do that, especially in roles where we do have a lot more on our plate. And so the delegation matrix is, again, as I said, all about identifying what are the things that only you can do. So the way this works is it's kind of broken out into four quadrants. And the idea is that this is really helpful if you have a task list. So in Inclusion Geeks, we use Asana. And so that's how I use this matrix in conjunction with my Asana task list. And so the upper quadrant here, which is urgent and important, which is titled Do Now, are tasks that they have deadlines. It's going to be a consequence if they don't get done. These are the things that only you can do. And ideally, you should have no more than three things in this box. This could be having a one-on-one with a direct report. It could be a focus group. It could be talking to a vendor, anything that only you can do. This next quadrant on the upper right-hand side, which is do next, are things that are important, but they're not necessarily urgent. And so these are the lists of things that they're important, they need to be done, but they're not today's top priorities. And so this typically, I like to start this as just a brain dump. So this is everything that's in my brain that needs to get done. Put it down on paper, put it down in Asana, and whatever tool that you use, whatever works for you. And again, these are things that also only you can do, and they are important, but you have some more time to get them done. So they're not something that necessarily needs to be done today. Now, if we go down to the bottom part, on the bottom left-hand side, we have delegate. And these are tasks that are not important, but are still urgent. And this is the hardest part. So this is where these are things that maybe you could do and you could do them really well, but these are things that you need to give to other people. So who has bandwidth? Who would enjoy the project? Who would do it well? Or who could learn on the project? Who would benefit most from that experience? And that's a great way to get things off of your plate and give your team more things to do. And then finally, the don't do quadrant. This is the most fun part because these are things that you're just not going to get done, and that's okay. So a couple things on my don't do list. I won't pick up a phone during a meeting or a webinar like this. So if the phone's ringing, I'm not going to pick it up. I'm not going to start my day without looking at my to-do list. I'm not going to, work on things that will hold me back. So these are all things that you just can say no to, or maybe it's a task that's been lingering for a really long time and it's just not even relevant anymore. So you can just go ahead and delete it. So again, these are just a couple different techniques and tools for thinking about how to prioritize. This is just one example. You might have others that are coming to mind. And one last thing I'll mention is that this framework is sometimes also referred to as an Eisenhower matrix, or a time management matrix, or the urgent important matrix. You might hear it being described with different topics and different titles. So that's just one example, as I said. And what I'd love to know from you all is, can you think of any other ways to practice micro resilience at work or even in life. And so this is our first Slido poll. And again, if anyone's unfamiliar, the way that Slido works is you can go ahead and take your phone if you have it handy or another device and grab that QR code. Or if that's not accessible or available to you, go directly to slido.com and the code is 2998211. If it's just not working for you, because sometimes technology is not our friend, you can also use the chat and let us know. And as folks are typing in, I'm just going to do a quick look through chat and make sure I haven't missed anything here. Okay. So yeah, we'll share some more resources after this webinar is over. And there was another question that came through, which was around the matrix, which was, does this matrix should be used every day as a way to plan your day? So it doesn't have to be used every day, but again, just like any tool in your toolbox, play around with it, see what works for you. I use this. So again, I mentioned that we use Asana at Inclusion Geeks. And so what I did in Asana, and this isn't actually, I don't think this is true for my colleague Rachel, but Rachel, let me know if you handle things differently. But the way that I use this matrix is I don't actually use it as a box. What did was I went into the settings of our task system and I created a column essentially where there's labels. So every task that I have, I can label it with those four different titles: do now, do next, delegate, or don't do. And I can go in and tag my task. I don't do it every day. I don't do it even maybe every week, every month, but I'll kind of go through periodically and I'll just sort of revisit what's on my list because sometimes, like I said, things shift around, um, things change. People on your team might be, going on vacation or shifting or whatever. So it's a good idea to kind of revisit it every now and then, but that's how I use it. So do whatever works best for you. You may find that it's helpful to do that every single day, but for others, it may not be that helpful. Rachel said, I'm not better at it. Again, we all try to figure out what works best for us. So this may or may not work good for you. All right, let's see what's coming through in the Slido as folks are typing away. So we see some stuff around stop looking at my phone while in elevators and while eating. You are a better person than I am. I would definitely be on my phone in both those situations. But again, what works for one person may not work for somebody else. Say your assumptions out loud. I love that. Naming things, really important. Taking a short walk outside, yes, can be really, really helpful, especially when it's not 100 degrees outside. Just stop and take a break. Yes. And you know what? Sometimes easier said than done, right? That's actually can be a hard thing for some of us to do. I make sure my time off is time off. I don't look at email. Absolutely. One thing that I sort of consistently am always playing around with is having notifications on or off on my phone during time off. And so I kind of go back and forth. Sometimes things are happening and I feel like it's better if I have notifications for things like Slack or email. Other times I want to make sure that I'm not distracted. So again, that's a great example of something to see and adjust as needed for you. Close your laptop during face-to-face meetings. Yeah, unless you're taking notes, right? That can be really helpful for some folks. Trello is another great tool as well. Absolutely. Reach out to someone else to talk. Schedule meetings with 5 to 10 minutes between them. Yeah, one thing I do is, for example, when I do a webinar like this, I actually physically block off time on my calendar before and after the webinar because I know that I'm going to want time to both mentally prepare and actually prepare and get set up. And then afterwards, I might have some follow up or I might stay after chatting with someone. And so I don't want to have a meeting immediately before or immediately after. So typically I will block between 30 minutes to 60 minutes before a training, a webinar, an important meeting, things like that, just to give myself that buffer time. All right, let's see what else we have here. Walk away from desk for breaks, delete the Teams app while on vacation. Yep, delete or mute. Let's see, we got some more stuff here. A lot more stuff coming through. All right. 10 squats at my desk to distract myself. I should probably do something like that. That's a good idea. Set an alarm twice a day and it says stretch tea time. Oh, I love that. Remind myself to be my best friend, give myself advice. That can be sometimes easier said than done. We're sometimes harsher on ourselves than we are on other folks. Turn off personal notifications, practice mindfulness while washing hands, getting a glass of water. I love that. Perfect short break that's already built in. Sour candy fan here, love that as well. Have the calendar with the do not disturbs, block out time. Yep, I'm obviously a fan, as I said. No work stuff while I eat lunch. I'm the same way. That's when I catch up on all my social media, other stuff. All right, lots of great ways that we're already coming up with to practice resilience. Now, Let's move into further identifying our personal resilience factors. So, resilience anchors, actually, not factors, resilience anchors, what those are repeatable actions, like a lot of the ones that you've just identified in that Slido. They're rituals, they're values that help keep us steady. They don't need to be super fancy, and we're going to review an activity that will help us identify our own anchors. But to get us there, I'm going to first review a couple key frameworks that will be helpful, I think, for our brainstorming. So, I'm going to start with a 16-second cure. Now, remember, I just talked through like mere minutes ago that example of the elite tennis players, right? So, that 16 to 20-second reframing pause is actually called by researchers this or and by practitioners, I guess, tennis practitioners, the 16-second cure. And it's taught in tennis clinics by I don't know tennis very well, tennis practitioners, for lack of a better way of calling them. And it has four different stages. So, stage one is positive physical response. So, that's whether you win or lose. And this is a physical expression like a fist pump or turn a walk away. It's something physical, but it's not a physical reaction that conveys negative emotion. And this is like 3 to 4 seconds at most. So, like, did that. Stage two, relaxation. So, this is where we're breathing evenly and deeply. We're focusing on our breathing. And this is, again, really quick. It's like 5 seconds, no more than 15 seconds tops. Stage three, then you're preparing. So, this is the time that you take to decide how are you going to take that next step. So, you could remind yourself of something you want to keep in mind. You could remind yourself of something like, let's stay positive. You could visualize correcting a mistake that you made. Focus on something simple like, don't get annoyed, whatever it might be. And again, this is really quick. This is like 3 to 5 seconds. And the last stage, stage four, is ritual. And for tennis players, what this looks like is it could be how many times you bounce the ball, or how are you swaying back and forth, something that you're doing physically. It's some ritual, whatever that looks like for you, that helps you stay relaxed and concentrated. When I was thinking about how this might be applied to the workplace, I know that some of this research has kind of been debunked, but anyone remember the power pose? I think it was Amy Cuddy back in the day, the power pose with your fists on your hips and you kind of stand, have a certain stance. I was thinking about that. So it could be something like having a little power pose or like pumping yourself up in some way. So, the 16-second cure. Now, there's some great researchers out there in this topic, and really sort of the top are Bonnie St. John and Alan P. Haynes, and they are key proponents of the concept around microresilience. And they've developed five main frameworks for microresilience that are based on neuroscience, psychology, and physiology. So I'm going to quickly review those five frameworks because I think they're really helpful for us to think through. So first is refocus your brain. So this is all about how can we use our brains more efficiently. So that's where those quick mental resets come into play. How can we be focused? How can we intentionally create specific times or spaces during that day that we are working where we can have focused attention on just one task. For me, that could look like turning off notifications. Sometimes I will set an hour timer and say, I'm going to work on this annoying project that I have to get done, and I'm just going to put an hour on. And if it's the worst hour of my life, I won't do it after that hour, but I'm just going to give myself that time framing to get into it. It could be using noise canceling headphones. It could be taking notes, making decisions early in the day when you're more fresh and focused versus later in the day, whatever that looks like for you. Second framework is reset your primitive alarms. So what this means is calm down and think about how can you calm down your body's stress responses so that you're not going to be hijacked by anxiety or panic. Your amygdala is not going to go into overdrive here. And again, for anyone who's been in one of our unconscious bias workshops, you know that we love talking about the brain and how the brain operates. And our brains are hardwired to react strongly to threats. So, in order to prevent the amygdala hijack happening, what we want to do is recognize what distracts us, what annoys us, what triggers us, and think about how can we change or avoid that. Deep breathing is a great way to reset, and I'm going to talk about a method in just a few minutes, and I'll demonstrate that for us. A smell could also be really helpful to reset emotional state. So, is there like a perfume or a scent that helps maybe evoke feelings of positivity in you? Have that on hand. So, how do we kind of reset ourselves? Third is reframe our attitude. Now, it's really easy to get stuck into a negative spiral. This is negativity bias in full force. So, how do we shift our mindset to spiral into positive thinking versus negative thinking? Much more easier said than done. And I'm someone who loves going into the negative spiral. So I will tell you, it's really hard to spiral positively, although it can be done. So, how you can do this is, again, keep things close by that help lift your spirits, maybe like a picture board or a mood board. I know you all can't see it because you're just seeing my lovely face right here, but right behind my laptop on my wall is a big board that I have, and it's full of things that make me feel really happy. So it's pictures of my friends from college at our 20th college reunion last year. It's pictures of pets. It's little, note cards that I've gotten from friends. It's messages of positivity. So anytime that I need a little quick reframe, I can look directly above my laptop and it's right there for me if need be. All right, next framework is refresh your body. So physical health, mental health, efficiency, emotional well-being, it's all connected. Nutrition, movement, rest. How can we make sure that we're supporting that, we're making changes to boost our energy? And again, first on the list should be hydration and try to get water in. I'm saying this as someone who loves a couple cups of coffee and often forgets that water is important as well. All right, last framework is renew your spirit. And this is how can you connect with your sense of purpose or meaning to stay motivated? And one way to do this is identify your values and make sure that you're really staying true to those. So these are five different frameworks that are available to us. And what I want you to do is I want you to think about these frameworks and pick just one. And whichever one you pick, and there's no right or wrong answers here, but just pick one that's really kind of maybe speaking to you, or it could be one that you're doing already, or maybe it's one that you haven't thought of before, but you might want to focus on trying out. What is the associated action or anchor that's tied to that framework? And so, as you're thinking about that, there's a couple of examples that I put here on the screen. I'm going to just really quickly talk through them, but I want you to be thinking about this, and I'm going to ask you to share in just a moment. So, if you're thinking about refocusing your brain, it could be blocking off time on your calendar, like a couple of us have already shared. If you're resetting your alarms, maybe practice some deep breathing, like box breathing, and I'll talk about what that means in just a moment. If you're reframing your attitude, that picture board that I mentioned, refreshing your body, drink the whole bottle of water, not just a couple sips here or there. And then maybe if you're thinking about renewing your spirit, for us at Inclusion Geeks, we're a mission-driven organization. So for me personally, I always like just reminding myself of why we're doing the work that we do. But maybe for you, it could be actually listing out your key values. So there's no right or wrong answer here. Everyone is unique. We're all going to be coming at this from different standpoints. So whichever one works best for you. Now, what I'd love you to do is, because accountability is part of this, is maybe share. Now, if you don't feel comfortable sharing, or if it's really personal, of course, you're not obligated to. But if you do feel comfortable, think about sharing in the Slido. Same Slido code as before. It's hashtag 2998211. And you're also welcome to share it in chat if that's easier for you. All right, so I see some folks are typing through. And yeah, as I'm just looking through chat, smells, it's such an interesting way to reset our brain and it evokes such strong memories in us, right? So again, for me, as I said, I like to try to build in rituals. So I like to make sure that, for example, and Rachel knows this well, I find that I need to have a dedicated midday break in order to function. So that break is usually my lunch break. And I typically will block it off on my calendar so that it doesn't get overwritten with meetings or other things that come up. Because I know that if I don't have a dedicated break, even if it's 15 minutes long, it doesn't have to be super long, but if I don't have a dedicated break, I'm not going to be at my full best self. So that's something that I've done to block off time on my calendar. And I'm a huge fan of time blocking. Some people are listening to piano music, stepping out or sidetracking or stacking rather, stepping outside. I'm not reading this correctly. Stepping outside or stacking on a few deep breaths and feeling the sun on your skin. Absolutely. Walking somewhere, positive self-talk, pump yourself up a little bit, jam out to music. Yeah, the comforting fragrance, so interesting. And I only wear two perfumes randomly, which maybe is not what you thought you'd learn from coming to this webinar today. But I only wear two perfumes, although back in the day I was definitely a big Bath and Body Works fragrance person. But I've actually been thinking about playing around with the idea of scent a little bit more and maybe wearing something when I'm doing something hard or working on something in particular, maybe try to retrain my brain a little bit. So I'll keep you posted on how that works for me. Some people are using fidget toys and a worry stone, a cat bed on our desk. Yes, we are big cat fans here at Inclusion Geeks, and I've had to build a whole cat area for my cat Julius because he loves to get up in my business when I'm working and it's very distracting and I love it, but he's got his own bed to the side. Body beats. Oh, I haven't heard of that one before. So this is gently slapping your thighs and shoulders for 30 seconds. Love that. Definitely want to learn more about that one. Let's see, we got a couple more people typing through, and then in chat, we've got essential oils to the scent thing. I guess we're all just going to start like some perfume side projects now. I love this for us. This person has a lava bead bracelet and puts chamomile essential oil on it. Love that as well. Yeah, so again, like as you're thinking through all of these things can be very applicable both personally and professionally. And that's what I love about this idea of micro resilience is that it's helpful across the board. So it's not just tied only to working, and it's also not just tied only to things like self-care or how we operate in our personal lives. It has applicability for all of it. All right, I see people are still typing in, so I'm going to give 30 more seconds and then we'll move on. But I want to see what else people are coming up with your actions and your anchors. So this person's got, I just get a cup of tea. And I will say on that note, my actions and anchors do change seasonally. So for example, during spring and summer, I'm more inclined to go outside and take a walk. In the winter, I might do that cup of tea instead because I kind of go into hibernation mode. This person uses an app called I Am. I haven't heard of that one. That's great. Thank you for sharing. There are some positive affirmations. Awesome. Love that. Focus on the pets. I'm sure they love that too. Any of us pet owners know, pet parents. And again, we got the scent. Love it all. All right. So we've all got some great actions and anchors, and some of us are already doing these things, and maybe some of us are going to try this out in the future. So thank you all for sharing. All right. So let's talk about our workout plan because this is kind of leading us into how do we keep this going? How do we implement this? So here's a daily exercise that you can do to practice mindfulness and build your micro resilience so that you can manage those daily stressors. So first, find a quiet, private place where you can be undistracted for a few minutes. It could be, and actually, I don't know if people can see really well, but my background's a little bit muted, but I got this really nice comfy chair behind me. This is not a green screen. This is my office. I have this wonderful gold comfy chair behind me, and it's what I call my therapy chair, which is where I sit and have my virtual therapy sessions. But that's also the space that I go to sit to do things like this workout plan. So it's nice, it's quiet, I'm not in front of my computer. Make sure that it's comfortable. You're sitting comfortably. Maybe your back is straight, but it's relaxed. Whatever works for you. Maybe that means you're lying down somewhere. I don't know. You are the best judge of that. Make sure that you're now focusing your awareness on your breath and you're staying very attentive to the sensations of inhaling and exhaling, and then starting again on the next breath. Don't judge your breathing. Don't get too into it and start thinking, am I breathing long enough? Is it too hard? Is it loud? Whatever. Some of us, that's where our minds go. Try not to do that. Don't try to change your breathing in any way. Just focus on being present. And if anything's popping into your mind, just think of it, hold it, look at it for a moment, think of it as a mere distraction, and then let it go. That could be a thought, a sound, let it go and make sure you're returning your attention to your breath. A lot of you are like, yep, I know how to do this. I go to yoga class or I practice meditation or I've got an app, whatever. And so some of us, we don't do this. But if you try this exercise maybe every day, 8 weeks, a couple minutes a day. What researchers actually found is that employees at a large tech company who did this kind of exercise on a daily basis found that it was easier to remember what they loved about their work and why they got into the industry in the first place. So really helpful for the workplace, but also just in general. Now, I mentioned already box breathing, and this is where you can use box breathing. So if anyone's not familiar with box breathing, I'm going to quickly talk us through it, but also it can be a nice time for us to use this webinar time as a chance to have our own little reset moment. So please feel free to follow along with me. So, however you're sitting right now, maybe just find a little comfortable position, lie down, sit down, as long as you can hear me. Optionally, you could close your eyes, and this can help us focus on our breath sometimes. Now, I want you to inhale and breathe in slowly through your nose for a count of four. So, inhale, one, two, three, four. Hold that breath for a count of four. So, one, two, three, four. Now, exhale for one, two, three, four. Hold your breath again for a count of one, two, three, four. And you can repeat this as many times as you need or as long as you find helpful. So that's what we call box breathing. So it's basically counts of four all around. Now, I want to quickly mention organizational resilience because when we're talking about the workplace in particular, it's not just about us as individuals, although we make up workplaces, but a culture of organizational resilience does rely heavily on things like role modeling behaviors. And so, even a just small handful of highly credible, high profile people who are in organizations like the ones that you all are part of, if you're demonstrating resilient behaviors personally, that helps encourage other people to do the same. And this is proven through research, which I love. So these role modeling behaviors could be things like persisting in the face of adversity, although again, we don't want to get in too far into that overwhelm and just, survival mode kind of persistence, right? Put your effort into dealing with a challenge and not just avoid it. Practice and demonstrate self-aiding thought patterns, provide support, provide mentoring, lead with integrity, stay true to your values, practice open communication, be decisive, don't be really wishy-washy. So that's how we can think about organizational resilience. Now, as we start to kind of come to a bit of a close, and we'll move into Q&A in just a moment. So if you do have questions, start thinking about them, and you can start even putting them in the chat if you'd like to. What I want you to tell me for one last time is what's one micro practice that you are going to think about trying out this week? So this is something that you don't already do, but maybe was mentioned and you might want to try it out. So let me know what you're thinking about. And as folks are thinking about that, if there are questions that are coming to mind, we can either have you use the raise hand feature and I'll call on you to unmute yourself, or you can put your question into the chat and I'll be happy to answer as well. We do have a few questions that were submitted in advance through Eventbrite. So I also have some questions that I'll be happy to answer if you already asked your question and you'd like that one to be answered. All right, so as folks are typing through, I'm just going to quickly take a note of what is coming up and then we'll see where we go with the questions. All right, so we got some people who are going to try box breathing, the scent. I feel like the scent was a big takeaway for us today, right? Breathing, stretching, a lot of breathing exercise, using those, different oils or the scents. Breathing seems to be the big one. And box breathing is great. And it's, again, there's a lot of other options and things out there. And I don't know about you, but I'm really bad at meditating. It's just something that I probably should work on more. So maybe that's my micro practice that I'll be working on. But something like the box breathing can be a great way to sort of get into that mindset because it gives you something to focus on with your brain. And so it helps kind of put some of those distractions to the side. All right, so I see there's maybe one or two more people typing in, so we'll give it another 30 seconds to see what else comes through. Mindful transitions. Yeah, the body tapping. Love that. I definitely want to learn more about that. So that's maybe actually that'll be my commitment. I'm going to focus on the body tapping and learning more and trying that out for this week. All right, so I'm not seeing any questions in the body tapping. Yeah, body tapping and breathing. All right, I'm not seeing any questions come through via chat at the moment. So again, if you are thinking about something that's top of mind and you'd like to go ahead and use the raise hand feature, please feel free to do so. But I'm going to start us off by going through, I've got a couple questions that came through earlier. So the first question was, and I'll put this in the chat just so folks can follow along. So this was the first question that we got, which was how can we give and receive feedback and stay grounded? And feedback can be really stressful. So great question. I love that this person asked this in advance. So what I would recommend, and we do have whole trainings just on giving and receiving feedback, but what I would recommend is first, just plan out how are you going to give the feedback. And this is where there's tons and tons and tons of different models like SBI, situation, behavior, impact. lots of other models too, but a model, a framework could be really helpful to help you sort of situate your feedback and really plan it out. Keep in mind, feedback, as I always like to say, is a gift. You may not like the gift, you may not want it, but it is a gift nonetheless, whether you're giving it or if you're receiving feedback. You could say something like, hey, person that you're talking to, I have some feedback that I would like to share with you about XYZ. Is that okay? Or is this a good time? Right? So that's something you can say and always use a lens of curiosity. And if you're someone who's giving feedback, it can be really helpful to share the why behind the feedback. All right. I see there's a question around logistics, and yes, we are recording this, and so if anyone's in the session live, we will be sending that afterwards. All right. Second question was from someone who I'm going to guess is a teacher, perhaps, which was, how can I share this strategy with my students? Or maybe you're thinking, how can I share this strategy with my employees or my family members or my friends or my pets? I don't know, fill in the blank. If you are thinking that you'd like to share anything that came up today, so first of all, we will have the recording that's going to be sent out, so you'll be able to refer back to some of this stuff. What I would also maybe suggest is think about having whoever you're working with, whether there's direct reports, your students, your colleagues, whoever, think about having them go through and do an activity of coming up with the anchors and practices like we did together. So you could show them those 5 different frameworks and then say, go through and say, like, what are your anchors? And maybe share some of the anchors that we talked about today or that you've already practiced or that you've learned about that you'd like to try out. All right. This next question was great, and I'm so excited that this person asked it, which was, what's the difference between resilience and survival? And why I love this question is because I think it just really speaks to where we are today in 2025. So I kind of touched on this a teeny little bit in the beginning, but in my mind, they are related because sometimes what we see as resilience is actually masking survival mode. And this is where that macro versus micro really comes into play. Okay. So with micro resilience, the goal is, as we talked about already, the goal is to just recover a little bit along the way so that we can keep going. And with survival or macro resilience, the goal is to just make it one step at a time, and there is no recovery that is built in. So it's just pushing forward, but micro resilience is we're building in some recovery as we're pushing forward. And the biggest reason for this difference is that because with survival mechanisms, it's inherently short-term focus. We're just looking at what's coming up right in front of us next. You do whatever it takes, even if it's not sustainable long term, in order to stay alive. Resilience, on the other hand, especially micro resilience, it is a long-term play. So it's about overcoming those challenges, identifying them and overcoming them so that we're not just surviving, but we're thriving. And so it's really about incorporating that idea of not just making it through, but making it through and helping ourselves along the way to be in a better place. All right, I'm gonna take another pause and just check really quickly. I don't see any raised hands, so I do have a few more questions that came through. I don't see any questions in chat, so I'll keep going. We have 5 more minutes. All right, next question is, let me put this in the chat as well. This is, how do moments of micro resilience change larger systems, or do they? Well, so when we're talking about micro resilience, we're focusing on those small, continuous improvements that strengthen teams and strengthen our operations over time, right? So if we're focusing on those moments, that can help us understand how can we handle our work more effectively? How can we be more strategic about our work? How can we be more strategic about ourselves? And it helps us also then recognize patterns and obstacles. By doing that, we have an opportunity to impact and change the systems that we're working with and that we're working in, but it's not a guarantee. So that's kind of how I think about that. Next question, and actually this is the last question that came in advance. So if anyone's been holding on to something, now is the time for you to think through and share. So this is our last question that came through in advance. What are some ways of coping at work, especially when your body may be having a really visceral reaction of panic? Really important question. So first, I would say it's important, and hopefully this is true for all of us, but you should be aware of what maybe causes you to go into panic mode or what triggers you. Some of us were like, yep, I totally have very good grasp of what that is. Others of us may not actually realize what causes us to shift into panic mode. So first, Be aware of what triggers you. Then, for some of us, we may have some kind of like warning signs that lead us to that panic mode. So, do you have any physical indicators? Does your face get really flushed? Do you start sweating? Does something come up in your mind? Whatever that might be for you, is there a physical indicator that helps you identify? Labeling your emotions when you're feeling big feelings can also be really helpful, and that can actually help calm the emotional centers of the brain. So, what that could look and sound like would be, let's say you're in a discussion with a colleague, you could say to them, I'm feeling really frustrated right now. So, instead of just feeling frustrated, you could say, I'm feeling frustrated right now. You could take a deep breath. You could count backwards from 10 or 20 or 100 or however much time you need to count backwards. Visualize yourself in a peaceful place. Take a break, take a walk. You could say something like, "I'm not really ready to have this conversation right now. Let me take a quick break. Let's regroup in 5 minutes. Let's regroup in an hour. Regroup next tomorrow, whatever it might be." You could ask for clarification, and I find that's really helpful, especially when something has been said that makes me react in a certain way. But this is where kind of intent and impact come into play, and I know that the person doesn't want me to get upset or angry, but that's how I'm feeling. I might say, "Can you explain a little bit further? What do you mean by that?" Kind of get into clarification mode. You could also take a pause and take a break and talk to a trusted colleague, a friend, a spouse, a pet, a mentor. Talk to someone else and just kind of, again, give yourself a little bit that brain break there. All right. So, couple things, and those are some questions that came in advance. So, we have just a few minutes left together. So, just to kind of start wrapping us up, think about a time to go from here. Think about a time when you practice micro or even macro resilience. Who were those supportive people in your life? Did you use any strategies that helped you cope with the negative thoughts or feelings? Did you use any solution focused behaviors? That's all really important and relevant to this discussion. Now, we have some more stuff coming up. So, next month in August, we are actually not doing a traditional webinar like this one today. We're going to be doing a community care circle. So, that's on August 21st. If you haven't signed up yet, feel free to go ahead and make sure you sign up for that. That should be a great discussion. Our September webinar is civility, heavy air quotes there, civility at work. Who gets to be heard? Who gets silenced? That's on September 25th. And we have some more stuff coming up in the fall, which we'll let you know in the future. We also have a podcast. So if you're interested in our podcast, check it out. We just had some great conversations. And thank you all so much for being here today.